also the Director of Community Engagement and Culture at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Who knows about the Atlanta Regional Commission? Make some noise. Yay! Oh, that's a pretty good drawing. Thank you. Cool. So, I'll be speaking on both things. And this panel came to be because as a socially engaged artist, I always wanted to figure out how to operate as an artist in the world when the artist doesn't value, or the world doesn't value me, right? There's not enough opportunities, there's not enough this and that, right? So you gotta be sneaky, right? You gotta learn how to be a parasite to institutions. You've gotta figure out how to navigate these systems and who you can collaborate with. And so there is an opportunity. I grew up in Atlanta. I came back 2.5 years ago, really understanding what the art scene is. And there's an opportunity. Well, what I keep on hearing is that there's not enough. Just not enough to support, right? We had some great panels about how artists are supported, how nonprofits are being supported earlier, but it's not enough. Artists are leaving. Artists aren't becoming artists. And however, there are a lot of people doing this work that are outside of this room right now. They happen to be queer, trans, disabled, BIPOC folks in our communities that this panel, but they are doing a lot of hard work in their communities because that's how they have to exist in the world. So that's a long way to say that there needed to be some kind of discussion of what's happening and what's possible. So who in this room thinks that there's possibility in Atlanta? Make some noise. Okay, that did not sound as loud, I will have to say, as the other ones. So we're gonna have to work on that, right? We're gonna have to, and that's the actual thing, we're going to have to learn how to collaborate. We're going to have to get out of our comfort zones. We're going to have to build new relationships. We're going to have to support each other. And we're going to have to see what kind of art is possible and how it's all beneficial to the city. So that's my whole thing to start. And so I've met these wonderful 3 people. These 3 people did not know each other prior to this panel. I think some of you know some of these people, but now you're going to know all of these people. And I would love to introduce, or have y'all introduce yourselves on what you're doing in Atlanta, and how does your work relate to cross-sector collaboration, and how you came to it.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, we got time.
Okay. So I'm Birney Robert, and I'm the strategist and external engagement and arts activation kind of ambassador for Georgia Tech in this new office that is called the Arts Integration and Innovation Office. And so really focusing on these blurred lines between art, science, technology, and education, and kind of making them more accessible to the Atlanta community. And arts are really important to Georgia Tech's research enterprise. And so Georgia Tech, along with some other research universities, are really incorporating arts into their practice. And I'm here today to let you know what we're doing, as well as hear of how we can collaborate together. And I've been in 3 worlds, the art world, education world, and this science and technology world. And I did a master's for a feasibility study for a museum and residency program for art, science, and technology at Georgia Tech. And then I got a Microsoft grant after that to curate 2 exhibits at this intersection to kind of further that research to see if the community wanted things like that. And they were cross-sector exhibits. For example, we had a researcher in material science that collaborated with an artist for this piece called Sulphur Skies. So it was Jeremy Bolin and Dr. Juan Pablo Correa Baena. But then my life with all these cross-sector collaborations, as I look back, I worked at the city, I worked at Emory, worked at now Georgia Tech in a Sandler Hudson Gallery. This new role is very cross-sector. I'm working, the two flagship projects is a new degree program called Arts, Entertainment, and Creative Technologies, which will hopefully go online in 2026, as well as many other degree programs that use arts integration, as well as the Creative Quarter, which is 7 acres of land on the west side of campus, across from Coca-Cola headquarters, right around here. And so we're working with real estate, the community and government relations office, as well as the Enterprise Innovation Institute, which focuses on entrepreneurship and for arts integration. So that is a cross-sector work. So, yeah.
Woo! Wait, who's heard of the art program at Tech? Who's heard of? Make some noise. All right.
All right, everybody. My name is Clint Fluker, and I am the Senior Director for Culture, Community, and Partner Engagement at Emory University for our libraries, our Carlos Museum, and the Emory Center for Digital Scholarship. And because I just love working so much, I'm also the Interim Associate Director for the Carlos Museum. And I guess the best way to describe the work that I do on behalf of Emory's collecting institutions is I'm always trying to figure out, it's just a passion that I wanted to do growing up, and it's something that I do now professionally, is I'm always trying to get people interested in old stuff. Archives are a place where traditionally you have all these old papers and documents and rare books, and people are like, oh my God, are you done talking yet? That's my goal is to try and flip that narrative, to make people see how the archives and how antiquity, in the case of the Carlos Museum, or how the amazing kind of data and technical approaches that happen at the Center for Digital Scholarship, how those things intersect with your daily life, but also how they can just like come alive just like that. A while ago, I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Theaster Gates came to the archives at Emory, and one of the things that I really enjoyed from the conversations that we had with him was about his approach to the archives, and he was like, I want to freak the archive. I want to make it something that when you go in there, it's not what you're expecting. And that's really the way I look at it for all of these institutions. So when I do that kind of work, it's always very collaborative, and it's with a lot of the university. It's never with just like one unit, or with just one library, or with just the museum. It's with professors, it's with artists, it's with activists, it's with students, and we really kind of look at them as like tentpole projects. One of the important aspects of it is that I'm always trying to engage Atlanta and the arts, connect Emory to the arts and culture of the city. So a lot of the initiatives happen outside of the Emory context. It's not just about bringing people to Emory so much as it is just being part of the community that Emory is supposed to be a part of. And so I think probably like considering where we are, the most obvious example of this would be working with Floyd like 2 years ago for Hip Hop 50. So Floyd Hall, the executive director here, all of you know this, but because we're being recorded, it's probably good to say it out loud. About when he was at the Science Gallery Atlanta, one of the major initiatives that we ran was to celebrate 50 years of hip hop with the rest of the city. And we had collected, when I was the curator of African American collections at the Stewart Rose Library, Earwax Records papers, which is major record company, a store here in Atlanta from the early 80s and 90s here that just like collected hip hop, sold the records, and became like a beacon of hip hop culture throughout the city and throughout the East. So we wanted to make sure that everybody knew this, and we were like, we can't just put out like the papers and like the administrative documents of this wonderful place. And so we did a huge exhibit at the Science Gallery Atlanta where we're engaging people from all over the city featuring different archival collections that weren't just ours at Emory, but other people like DJs, other institutions, and the like. And we also consulted with a lot of artists in order to make that come alive. We wanted to figure out how to create an aesthetic that would make people just want to walk through there and kind of return back to the 90s when this was an era when people could be like, oh man, I just might run into Outkast in this place, or I might just run into T.I. as he's running, you know? So this was kind of the kind of initiative that we started with and the thing that we continue to do each year, so.
I know a lot of people know about Clint, but who knows about the Emory work that he does? Oh yeah, Zane does. Okay, great.
That's my son.
Awesome. Nikki!
Hi, everybody. My name is Nikki Estes. I'm a program director at South Arts, and I've been in the Atlanta nonprofit community for almost 30 years. My career in the arts started right here at Nexus, aka The Contemporary, under Louise Shaw's leadership. And from there, I went to the City of Atlanta Office of Cultural Affairs, managing grants. At South Arts, I managed several grant programs, including our cross-sector Impact Grant Program. And just a little bit about South Arts. If you don't know us, we are a regional arts organization. We're located in Atlanta, but we work in 9 southeastern states. There are 6 regionals in the U.S. We were created by the National Endowment for the Arts. So we work in close partnership with the state arts agencies in those 9 states. So we work really closely with Georgia Council for the Arts to deliver programs and services. Most of our programs really fall into grants to individual artists and arts organizations. We have programming that centers jazz music, traditional arts and film. We also have some leadership development and sustainability programs. And since we were created almost 50 years ago, we're having our 50-year anniversary this fiscal year, we have always given grants and always focused on grant making. And several years ago, we, during strategic planning, we thought, what else can we do other than what we're currently doing? How can we be more strategic and impactful with our grant dollars? So we knew that there was a lot happening in the South. We wanted to create programs that would uplift Southern artists, Southern communities, and Southern arts organizations, while also really helping to address issues that are happening in our communities. And so we created this grant program that encourages partnerships across sectors. So the grant program requires 2 partners, one in the arts sector, which can be an artist or an arts organization, and one in the non-arts sector. And the role of kind of that partnership, or the goal, is really to kind of harness the power of collaborative work, to use the arts as a creative tool to address our community needs. And so these are grants up to $15,000 that are locally sourced because they're local issues being addressed by the local community, which includes artists, residents, organizations. And the goal is to, bring people together, create relationships, work together, and kind of deepen the way that we work so that, more of our communities, more of the South can see how the arts and artists, their work really falls outside of, a gallery or museum. It really touches how we live, how we work, how we communicate. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Woo! Who knows about Nikki and yeah! Okay, great. So one thing that, just to piggyback off of what Nikki just said, is that artists are full people, right? So they have needs. They need a affordable place to stay. They need a living wage. They need people to support their work. If they're a parent, they might need childcare. They need support, wraparound support systems, right? And so the benefit of just thinking of a funding organization to have artists work with a non-arts organization gives the opportunity for an artist to tap into something outside of just their art self, right? And I don't know about you, but I have a lot of things that make me up as an artist, including fighting fascism and stopping Cop City, all of these things that also directly impact my day-to-day life. So I'm curious from y'all, you've invested in this, your careers in this, what are some of the benefits that you've seen of doing this? I mean, it sounds like there's like a real potential and real possibility for community change through artwork, through artists and art projects. There's accessibility, but what are the benefits that y'all are finding in doing this outside of the traditional like art world? And then what are some challenges that you're coming up with or coming against?
I can start since I have the mic. So I would say, just as you said, repeat, community change is happening in the community that is so relevant to that specific community, to that neighborhood or those residents, is what we're seeing with this grant program. I would also say sometimes policy change. Some of these grants support advocacy for LGBTQIA+, for social justice, housing justice, infrastructure, all kinds of things, climate change. So we are seeing some more dialogue around issues, possible policy changes. I would say also, again, just for the non-art sector, recognizing the power of the arts to help address some of these needs. And, you know, authentic relationships.
Yes.
So I'll say that one part of it is, in a similar way, is supporting the different the artists in the art galleries around the city. So that's one aspect of the work that I do with my office, which is, again, to connect our collections to the art and culture of the city. And the way that we do that is really we support different initiatives. So, for example, if it's an exhibit at Akazi ATL on Auburn Avenue, or an exhibition with Jer Art, which is just down the street from here, or if it's working with some other arts organization. These exhibits, which are often very hard to do because you need a lot of funding to do that, you need a lot of people to help think through some of the technical aspects of getting these exhibits to a place, especially if you're shipping things out of country, bringing in a speaker, bringing in the artists themselves. These are the areas that traditionally we will help with, so long as I can make a connection to our collections and to the work that we're trying to do to build community at Emory. And that is not a small aspect of our work. It's pretty big, and it's not something that is widely advertised because honestly, we are working out the best practices on how to do it. My role is an inaugural role. I'd say about 2.5 years ago, Emory's libraries and museum and the Center for Digital Scholarship were all brought under one roof. This is 6 major libraries and these other entities. They used to work separately. But now they're all together. And in order to think about how we would strategically go about creating partnerships and how we would go about, creating some type of system around supporting the arts and culture around the city, we needed to create a role for that. And so that's the role that I took. And so that's the most obvious benefit, is that these really cool ideas that people have around the city, they get to happen because we can support them. And my job is to help support those types of ideas. I guess some of the challenges around it would be that traditionally people are trying to find me at a library to help them with these types of projects. This is just something that I think we started years ago because of a collecting interest of mine when I was a curator, just straight up, where I was collecting the papers of contemporary Black artists. And so you start to kind of like get around in the art world that way, but really it was for the purposes of an archive. Whether I was at Emory or whether I was at the AUC Woodruff Library, these are the types of people that I was trying to engage with and bring their papers in so that we could salvage that history and promote that history. But in so doing, when we were thinking about how to engage people with these types of artifacts and these type of papers, it was like, how do you do that? Well, maybe you bring the artist in and you start to create new ways of going about showcasing the work. So this is just sort of expanded over the years. It wasn't like some grand plan that I put together by any means, but it all just sort of came together where we now have this office at Emory to support this kind of work. But it is still challenging getting the word out and ensuring that people know that it's present.
Yeah, I echo all these things because my role is an inaugural role too, and this is an inaugural office too for arts integration and innovation, as well as I want to echo what you said, Nikki. We collaborate with artists partnered with scientists and researchers within our artist in residency programs and stuff. But I think the benefits are funding. I think when you approach funding from a cross-sector manner, that there's more opportunity. There's especially a lot of more money in the tech sector. So when you bring in an artist and you base it around something that's STEM related or something, or a way that it can involve STEM is important and is a way to get more funding. And then another benefit to cross-sector approaches are diversity in thought and leadership, as well as in disciplines. I think that the cross-sector approach gives you other avenues to approach the arts as well. Challenges I'm seeing too at Georgia Tech is, access to who knows what we're doing, how can they get access to us, how do they learn more about this? That's why I'm here today, as well as my colleague, Kaylee Landau out there. So she heads up the Arts Innovation Network to help art startups and art organizations to improve, the economy of Georgia as it relates to arts. So you can see us afterwards too to talk more about that. Yeah.
Can I jump? I also want to mention a couple of challenges. I would say, because I mentioned earlier, authentic relationships is one of the strengths, but we all know that takes time to build, a long time. And also, we've noticed with some of our programs that, if you're working in the juvenile justice or in the system, the red tape is a challenge. If there's staff turnover and you've already started to create relationships with the previous staff, you have to, again, make those connections. So a lot of the relationship building can be obviously an asset, but also a challenge as well, and sometimes just the bureaucracy.
Talk about bureaucracy. ARC has so much red tape. And I want to give a shout out to my team member, Antamil Jorky, who has been helping us build out and carve out space for artists that are interested in civic engagement. So just to give a little bit about ARC, the benefits and challenges. So I think a lot of artists are interested, what people say, creative placemaking. I call it creative placekeeping and whatever, but also just thinking about place, right? And how we're shaped by place. And the benefit that we offer is we're able to organize artists. We have this amazing program that Antamil leads called Community Forums. It centers queer, trans, disabled, BIPOC artists who are interested, creators who are interested in civic engagement. And so that's our base building. And we have a few different pipelines. One is we have a community engagement. We have to use different words now. So it's a community engagement fellow for our housing work. And so Sydney Foster is about to do a project with Afghan youth in Clarkston to talk about a bill that was just passed. And so raising awareness about bills that are passed that benefit real people in our communities, including artists. And then being able to just shape our neighborhoods, our cities, have a voice in that, and being able to provide some creativity in that through the artists and their artwork. Challenges, Antamil and I have been fighting. We are a very bureaucratic place. We have our COO and our managing director totally believe in this work. And so having leadership that have your back is really important to be able to do this work because so many people don't get it. And I think Alex was saying earlier, like, the county cuts funding all the time. Well, no shit. Like, that's going to happen. And so you have to navigate through that. You have to fight. You have to figure out who your allies are. And we have some really wonderful allies. And we, like, work so hard to get leadership, to get our board on the page of just like how arts and culture is just integral into the daily life. It's part of the fabric, and we can't have neighborhoods and development without it. One thing I also want to ask y'all, because there is like some other cross-sector collaborations. There are people not on this panel. Emory does another great job with the Art and Social Justice program led by Jackie Pritz and Carlton Mackey, and there's other folks doing other things in the city, right? And so one thing that we're dedicated to and committed to is how to put artists first so that they're not instrumentalized by developers that come in and just like want a mural on the wall. And I keep on hearing artists saying, well, I can't live in the places that people want me to paint on, you know? So like how in your work, are y'all thinking about putting artists first or how to protect the artists in this process? I feel like, Nikki, that's the values of Cross Arts.
Right, so part of one of our priorities as an organization is to do what we can so that Southern artists can live and thrive in the South, so they don't feel like they have to leave the South, Atlanta, and go to New York or California, Chicago. So we want to see artists paid for their work, and we have a lot of work to do in that, but we are constantly asking our applicants, what are you paying the artists that are involved? What are the participants in the program being paid for their time and expertise? And I think oftentimes we see artist-led projects and the artists themselves haven't put in the budget their salary. And we question that. We just ask, you know, why is that? And sometimes there's a very good reason for it, but we want to see it in the budget. We want to see artists paid. I would also say that we, part of our work and some of our other grant making is to ask for contracts or letters of agreement, but from an organization to make sure that the artist is getting paid and that the artist knows what they're getting paid and for what. So we're trying to really be transparent between the applicant, which sometimes is the artist or sometimes is not, just to make sure that they're getting paid. And part of our new strategic plan is about uplifting more fair pay, more equitable pay to artists.
So I can give two examples. I guess I could give more, but for the sake of time, I'll give two examples, one from the Carlos Museum and then one from the libraries. So most recently, we just opened an exhibit at the Carlos Museum called Call and Response. And it features 5 objects from the Carlos Museum's permanent collection. And really, that's all it has out of our collection. The rest of it is really something that was curated by 5 different curators, all of whom were partnered with a community partner to help fill out the rest of the exhibit. It's a full 3rd floor exhibition, which is like the size of, up here. But it needed a lead curator, and often what we do is we'll get one of the main curators on staff to just sort of do that part. Or get the associate director or the head of education, somebody who knows the in and outs to be the lead for our project like that. But in this case, we decided to work with an artist. We worked with Masoud Olafani, and he was lead curator. So he was really making all of the decisions on how all of that should work together. And because of that, he also opened the exhibit. He leads all of the conversations with our docents when it comes to teaching others about how it will make its way throughout the rest of the semester. And to your point, you need a contract or an MOU. And I think it kind of depends on who you're working with. If you are working with a reputable organization that you trust, an MOU is fine. But if you aren't, you need a contract. You really need a contract so that you can have all those things outlined thoroughly. And yes, we make sure that the artist's consultant fee or the curator fee or whatever, we're describing that as is like right there, and we know in the budget before we move forward. Without it, we can't really move forward. And so that was one example that really led to great success. I'd say it was successful not just because Masood was awesome at doing what he did, but also it brought in a much more diverse and intrigued crowd than we usually have had. And we saw it already throughout the weekend, just like who was coming to the Carlos Museum as a result of a different approach. That's another one of those benefits we were talking about before. Similarly, kind of cross-sector, it's like in an art-adjacent location. Like we're at the library, and Woodruff Library is where all of the students come to, get ready for exams and all of the above. And so during last semester, in preparation for the elections and all the things that were going to happen in November, we decided that we didn't want to put up a historical exhibit, which is usually what we do. We wanted to provide a place for people to be still and to have time to reflect and to be at peace and to be grounded. And so we actually hired Sheila Prebright to come in and curate an exhibit which she called Breathe. We paired her with a curator from the Carlos Museum, and together they created a very different exhibit than what we usually would have. I think it had like maybe 10 very large images that were placed throughout the library when you entered the third floor, and there were yoga mats in front, there was music playing, there was poetry being read. This was all like Sheila's creation. And the idea was when you come into the library, once you're out of the library, all you're doing is like just hearing about the news, and you're just getting hype, like trying to get ready for what's coming. But when you come to the library, we wanted you to, just sort of take a breath, have a way to just sort of connect with yourself and to get grounded yet again. And she did that for us, and we hired her to do it, I guess is the main point. So in this kind of cross-sector way, it's not just about hiring the artist to, like, can I use your photographs? Or hiring the artist, can I get a painting or a mural? It is how do we talk with the artist and create with them to do something that is probably different than we've ever done before.
I think also this cross-sector collaboration, another benefit is getting various audience members too in front of your pieces and in front of your institutions or, the ways, and speaking of the libraries, the library has an amazing, at Georgia Tech, artist in residency program. We have a few artist in residency programs at Georgia Tech, but this is one of them, we have Boyana again, who was one of them, and she's here today. So at Georgia Tech, we have the utmost respect and support of our artists. We pay them, we support them, we promote their work, we document their work, we, represent them on various media channels for them or bring them on the shows with us. And they also get, the Georgia Tech branding and what all comes along with that. And they get access to researchers and labs and equipment that they might not be able to access on their own. I mean, we have maker spaces that have laser cutters, 3D printers. I mean, just so much, and you get training on them and all that. So we offer a lot to our visiting artists or artist collaborators or, degree programs for artists and researchers at this intersection.
Very cool. Two questions came into my brain. So one is around risk. So new audiences, new people getting exposed to this, new way of thinking about what art can do. Has there been a situation where, we're just dealing with this right now, but where there's a risk involved or there's too much risk, or just where does risk fall in to this? Because I think, this is fairly new, right? So there's a need and there's support, but have you encountered anything as of yet where you're just like, we need to rethink this, or we need to shift a little bit, or I need to convince this person first, or something like that. And maybe you haven't, but I'm curious about that, and also like how much risk does the artist have to actually say what they really want to say? Because if like, I don't know, tech has its, not Georgia Tech, but the tech industry has been pretty harmful. And so do you support artists that are like criticizing the tech industry or things like that?
I can answer first, but we can support that. I mean, we are a public institution, so the content and curation has to be to a certain level due to being under the USG. But we're going to collaborate with 404 Days, AI Day in the A, that's powered by Microsoft, and we'll have a few artists on display that are working with AI, and there are some that are very critical of AI. And so that's what's great about being at a university, is that it gives you a platform to discuss these, emerging technologies. But yes, there are some, we can't say everything maybe that you would want to. And then I want to say that, we partner with a lot of arts organizations that are here that might have more liberty to say certain things. So that's also another way that the artist or the researcher can, put their art out there in the truest way possible.
Yeah, I think any collaboration or any project that I've been a part of always feels like it might fall apart like at any moment, and so it's like I'm really kind of nervous until like the week of, I can't lie, even if it's like a year, 2 years out. And I think a lot of it has to do, it's not necessarily with artists specifically, it's more about like working with someone who is external to the system and the bureaucracy that already exists. So there's a certain way in which things already work, and if you're just using people to do each role like that are already familiar with that, then you're good. Like there's like people already know that there's going to be a some kind of pushback if you go this way or you go that way. When working with somebody from a different organization or an independent artist or an independent scholar, they don't know that and they don't care about that. So it's like that's literally why I exist. It's to try and bridge that gap so that everybody is as happy as they can be. I am an artist, I am an academic, and I am a curator. So I'm constantly trying to balance those things when having conversations with people. There definitely are, like kind of, like you were talking about, there's certain things that you can't say. Like we won't censor an artist at all, but I definitely want everyone to know like what's gonna happen next. It's like, so if we go in this direction, this is where this goes. Mm-hmm. Do what you will with it, but it's never, censoring anyone from, doing what they need to do. We just had an exhibit that opened in February called Anonymous Fragments by Timothy Hull. And it is an investigation of provenance within the museum context, as well as his own kind of aesthetic that he put up within the exhibit. And it was curated by Ruth Allen, our curator of Greek and Roman materials. That said, that's not exactly the easiest thing for us to put up. Like, as the Carlos Museum, we're certainly always in conversation about, as all museums are, with issues of repatriation and just like the ethics of collecting and things like that, but we went forward. So that is a balance that you have to put together, but I wouldn't say it's a huge risk so long as you have people that you can trust in place who are trying to be that go-between and can be honest with people about what's actually happening and about the contract or the MOU that you have. It's just like, this is what we agreed to. This is how we're gonna move forward. And if we're not coming up with what we said we're gonna do, that's on me. And so one risk that I don't talk a lot about publicly is really like my rep. It's like, it's not even Emory or another organization. It's like if I'm working with an artist or an independent contractor, it's usually a relationship I've formed, and they're working with me. and I'm working with Emory. And so if Emory doesn't come through with what they said, that reflects poorly on me. And so I'm like even more, eager to make sure that this goes, and it goes the other way too.
I'll just add, as a funder, the risk feel pretty low for us because these are not our projects. They're the artist or the grantees projects, and we are pretty much hands-off. But I would say, these grants are federally funded, and one of our community impact areas is social justice, and we fund equity projects, access, all kinds of things. That's currently being, under attack. So that is potentially a risk for us moving forward. For the grantees, sometimes I would say maybe not clearly define roles and responsibilities of each partner. Sometimes that plays out with, who's keeping track of the grant funds, who's managing those funds and who's paying out. Also, who is responsible for which parts of the project. Sometimes, particularly when it's a newly formed partnership, there may not be that, clarity within each other's roles, and sometimes there are assumptions being made and the project does not. It might fall apart or it might take longer. One of the things that we try to do with this particular project is offer 18 months to include planning time and possibly evaluation and feedback, but that usually takes sometimes longer than 18 months, and sometimes we're able to extend a project period and sometimes not. So I mentioned earlier red tape and bureaucracy. That certainly has challenged a lot of projects to kind of keep the original goals of the project. We try to be really flexible, so if something happens that impacts perhaps one of the intended goals, it doesn't happen, we're completely fine with that. So we just want to be flexible. We know that community change is hard, long, community engagement takes time, and so we try to work with the grantees with adjustments as they happen.
It's very generous. And all of y'all are very generous in doing the work that you're doing to support arts in these different fields. I am curious because one thing that I've experienced is that a lot of artists are just not familiar with practicing in this way. So I'm curious, do you have tips, or do you have where do you start? Or, obviously this is one beginning point, right? Y'all should all meet these people, shake hands, talk, right? But in terms of collaborating outside of a curator or just artists themselves, do you have any kind of or what you've seen that's worked really well or hasn't worked really well?
Well, at Georgia Tech, we have multiple degree programs that support the arts, and this new one coming online. So I think that's a great place to look into, as well as if you're interested in furthering your art with any certain researchers, you can talk to me or Kaylee today, and we have QR codes to sign up for our mailing list. Other ways are, this artist in residency program offers upwards of $30,000 for 6 months. We internally, our office got up to $100,000 in state-funded grants for arts to give to students and staff and faculty. And so I think coming also to our facilities, the Paper Museum, the First Center for the Arts, the library exhibit gallery space, and just getting involved that way is a great place to get to know people in different sectors.
That's a good chunk of change. Also, please note that 6 months for a project, 30 grand, that's pretty great in this town.
Let's see, what can I add to that? I would probably say that knowing that there are potential resources other than a grant-making institution or a funder that could support your work. I know some of my colleagues get work through other state government departments, and that might be a resource. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I would say really trying to find connections in the communities outside of your own immediate environment are probably extremely helpful. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of perhaps the quickest and easiest way is in the archives in particular at Emory University, they have quite a few fellowships. And when I say quite a few, I mean like there might be like 15 to 20 of these things that happen annually, where anybody can come and do research and get paid to do that research for a period of time. So a lot of this is really, the amount that you get is depending on like if you're coming from out of state or something like that. The idea being that, like if you're studying, Donald Locke and you're in Iowa, you need to get here and you need to see his papers. Well, they're at Emory, so how do we give you some funds to come through? But the point is that like anybody can have access to those fellowships, and outside of just doing your research in the archives there, you're also like on the radar then, because once you apply, there's a curator or there's an archivist or there's a librarian or somebody who has read that and now they know who you are and that you're interested in these types of things. And when that kind of thing happens, eventually I find out about that. And then we can do like some really interesting things. I would also say that what I've noticed is there's people that just show up to the free and open talks and exhibit openings. Charles is one of these people. He's sitting there smiling. He's always like front row or in the back, and I can always find him. But they just show up to this stuff, and then we know who you are. And a lot of this is, sadly, just word of mouth. It's like getting comfortable with somebody enough to be like, all right, so I know that you're really talented, but just being really talented is only the first part. The other part is we're gonna work together probably for the next year, maybe like a year and a half. And so like there has to be some, trust and familiarity that's built. And this is another way to do that, is to go to these types of openings and just be in the scene. And I've always said this, I know it's hard, I know it's so hard for a lot of people to do this, but I just hit up the directors of all the stuff, like all the time. Like if I'm interested in something, I just email them, like just cold email them. I've even called people, I've shown up and knocked on the door. I feel like some of this comes from going to school in the Atlanta University Center, where like you really can't get anybody on the phone half the time, so you just like literally have to go there physically and like see them yourself. But I think that like that kind of tenacity is what's important, because once they do know who you are, that's where the relationship really begins. And so often we get very disappointed when we send in an email and then no one responds. Most times they're not trying to ignore you, they just really missed it. It's like, I'm an artist and I have an administrative job. I stink at email. It's not because I don't like you, it's because I actually really am bad at email. She knows. Yeah. That's why she's been texting me the whole time. So I think that like just taking that extra step and knowing that they probably do want to meet you, especially if they're in a job like these jobs where there are resources to give, they literally want to do this. This is like the whole job. But in order to do it, we have to know you. And we're doing everything we can in many cases to get the word out. It's surprising, we were talking about this on the phone, that like every department at Emory that I work with, like all the libraries, all the archives, all that stuff, there's a person whose whole job is to do outreach. But despite that, it's still hard because of these barriers between universities and the communities that they're part of. These are long historical things that we're not going to solve on this panel. However, they still exist, and we need help to do this work too.
Can I just say one more thing? I just want to give a shout out because another way of opportunities is collaboration with various arts organizations. And Villa Albertine, we're collaborating with them for Night of Ideas with a few of our artists. Flux, art papers such as today, Fulton County Future Lab. So there are other ways also of entering into the university system through arts organizations.
Thanks, y'all. So we have a few minutes for questions. Anybody have any questions? Charles.
So my question is about, it's been mentioned several times about red tape and dealing with bureaucracies and how art is always cut first when it comes to budget. Are there any type of case studies that show like success stories of there being a good return on investment when it comes to investing in the arts? And then are there any, I guess, examples of horror stories, what happens when you don't invest in the art when it comes to like other states or cities? Yeah.
Well, Georgia Council for the Arts recently put out a report about the economic impact of the arts, and I would say that's great to share with policymakers, your legislators, about how the return of investment is happening. It's actually very strong. That I would say lean into that. I don't really have any horror stories other than we are last.
Exactly.
We're last. That's good enough.
Along with like the Georgia Council for the Arts, I mean, also with the Technology Association of Georgia report, I mean, just how much money is in the film industry and music and entertainment, and, you know, those are cousins of, you know, the visual arts and performing arts. So thinking about those presences in Georgia and how that's driving the economy, and, but I don't know.
It's a hard question to answer because so success is measured in different ways, like from a case study standpoint. So I think in some regard, I am someone within my community at Emory known for doing like larger projects. But in truth, like where a lot of people come. But in truth, I'm actually more interested in the smaller ones. Like I think that the smaller, consistent, like regular, you know, kind of gathering of people connects you to a community, builds a community over longer periods of time. And so there are a lot of success stories like that when it comes to the arts, the types of gatherings, the types of exhibitions, the types of partnerships. There's probably so many of those within the Emory context that I can't really name them all. That said, when it comes to measuring success, there are other factors to consider. That are often not related to whether or not we built the community or we joined the community that we said we wanted to. What we're often looking for is how many people came, can I report this back on the grant in a way that is understandable to the grantor? Is this something now that is justifiable to the mission of the organization, you know, whatever. You know, it's like now with all the stuff that's happening, you know, administratively with the federal government, there'll be more of that. That is a different kind of measure of success. And so when you ask that question, those are the two things. That's the thing that I'm constantly trying to balance is like, how do I do this, but also ensure that I am painting this the right way for people to see it. Really tricky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and as a funder, we do like numbers. I do want to acknowledge that. But we are also trying to do a better job at storytelling. It's not just about the numbers. We want to share what's happening in the South. We want to celebrate and uplift Southern arts and artists and communities. So we're looking at different ways to share that story outside of, you know, participation numbers. I'll also say, particularly with this grant program, we are looking at community change, and those aren't numbers. That is, you know, issues happening. And so one of the things that we're trying to do with perhaps this upcoming cycle, which we haven't launched yet, is build a more sustainable model into this program. So part of what we've always done with this program is we've offered grantees to return for 2 more years of funding. It's still a competitive process, so it's not guaranteed funding, but some projects will fund to expand the work, to continue the work, to dig deeper to what they started, because again, we know we're just scratching the surface with, you know, one year of support. What we may be doing in the next cycle is perhaps just working in one particular area. So right now we work in 5 community impact areas: education, social justice, environment, health and human services, and infrastructure. So what we might do, and this is not in pen, we're still working on our new programming, what we might do is focus on one particular impact area. Maybe it's health and human services for 3 years, so that we can see long term, it's really short term, 3 years, but we can see over 3 years how these projects are moving the needle more than we could in the 18 months that we supported the project. So really taking a more narrow focus on a 3-year period so that we can show the impact, we can show the change that's happening.
That's amazing, and I would just say that storytelling is huge as an impact measure, qualitative measurements, and at ARC, when I first got here, nobody clapped for ARC. So I feel like there's been, the way that we've been measuring success is just like nobody trusts government, and ARC has its own reputation, and we've been trying hard to decrease those barriers, center the artists, put them at the center of shaping neighborhoods, giving them skills, empowering them to work in all of these different fields too. So I would say we had a pretty successful year, and there's some successful things happening in Atlanta, so there's just gonna be a lot more.
I will say with the success of incorporating and integrating the arts within Georgia Tech too is different media stories come out, a way to understand, the research that's going on at Georgia Tech through these exhibits that we have, or these residencies that we have, or these degree programs. And so I think that the thing that art and storytelling has for, the typical research in the published paper is it can tell more of like a humanistic story to it. So I think those are benefits.
Totally. I'm really bad with time. Can we take any more questions, or should we just wrap it up?
I can take one more question.
Okay.
But maybe answer it.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Appreciate that. I just came from Mexico City, and it is filled with beautiful parks and plazas and sculptures and fountains and places that are designed for the public. So my question to you is, how are you advocating for the arts with commercial developers? How are you insisting that there are these spaces that are purely devoted to bringing people together?
I'll just answer that because that's definitely an ARC thing. I don't know, are there any developers here? Not a fan, by the way. So the way that we've been handling it at ARC is that there was this organization that invested, they had a grant from Chase that invested in developers of color. That's just like one stepping stone, right? And there's actually pretty badass developers here that actually have the same alignment of values. And they're small and they need support, so we are helping bringing them to more projects that are available through ARC in transportation and community development and other projects that are happening. So elevating their work and bringing them to the table. And I've only been there a couple of years, and I'm just still fighting with them, and I will fight forever because they are hurting a lot of things in this town.
We have public art initiative on campus, and as well as building out creative quarters, which is now known as, it used to be Art Square. We will be working with commercial developers to build out that space to be between industry and art and education. And so that will be in the next 10 to 20 years, so stay tuned. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have to wrap up, and then I just want to say one more thing so that everybody gets a really clear understanding. Sorry, Sarah. So, ARC, this is where you learn how to do this work. We have community forums. It's a regular gathering. Antamil Jorky is the lead. You can talk to her. This is how you understand how to cross-collaborate. That's one area, and we give you skills. You get to learn on the go, and then you get to apply to something at Georgia Tech. You get to apply, talk to Clint, do something there. You'll have your application ready for the cross-sector collaboration grant, and then you'll have other opportunities to succeed in your work. Thank you!
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for being here. So we have a little break between this and our next thing, but our final, I hope that folks will come back for our final program of the series and the weekend, which is our house guest talk, because we are Southerners and we like to have a house guest. And so we have invited Fauz Cabra and Itzhak Burbich to be our house guests. They're back there. And they're going to talk to us at 3:30 about Brief Histories, which is a space that they co-founded in New York City that is kind of a exhibition space and art project, small press. And they're going to talk about how they did that and how it came to pass and the kinds of things that they're doing there. And so I really hope that y'all will rejoin us at 3:30 for that. And even if you don't, thank you so much for being here and for being part of this, everyone.